Before diving into today's video, I just want to take a moment to talk about two organizations that I'm going to link in the description here: the Atlanta Community Food Bank and the Giving Kitchen. These two nonprofits help those in need around our city and our state, and in particular right now are a huge and very important resource to the many families that are out of work and in need because of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you have the means to give, I encourage you to check these organizations out and consider making a donation to help your community. And if you or a loved one are in need, please check out these resources. Atlanta is here for you, and we're all going to make it through this. What's up, Atlanta? My name is Charlie, and welcome to Big Sports ATL, where this week we have a long overdue Falcons Armchair GM episode. Originally, this series was supposed to be done before free agency started, but unfortunately real life happened, and then coronavirus happened, and things got a little behind schedule. Now that the NFL's free agency period has already started, what I would like to talk about is the moves that the Falcons have made so far, how they affect our salary cap going forward, and the wiggle room we have remaining to make future signings going into the summer, as well as how this likely affects our draft strategy with the draft coming up in just a few weeks here, hopefully. So before we get into the new players that the Falcons brought in, we need to talk about two guys already on the team, Matt Ryan and Grady Jarrett. Now, back in January, both of these guys agreed to restructure their contracts, creating a total of about $12 million in cap space, which is huge for the Falcons, who were right up against the projected cap for this year and needed some room to maneuver. Going into this offseason, it looked like the Falcons' options were going to be very limited, so these restructures from these guys really helped the team make some moves. On top of that, Matt Ryan restructured again last week along with Jake Matthews, creating another $10 million in cap space, which again was hugely beneficial in allowing us to round out the roster. Now, it's important to note that these aren't pay cuts. These guys are still going to get this money at some point. It's still going to affect our cap at some point in the future. We're kind of just kicking the can down the road here, but as you'll see, this seems to be kind of an all-in year for us, so it does make sense in that context. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the signings that we've made this offseason. And just as a quick note, I'm not going to go into detail on every player. A lot of these guys are just depth. Some of them are going to be fighting for a spot and won't even be on the roster come September. The focus here is going to be on guys that are probably more starter caliber and names that you're going to be hearing a lot more. So let's go back to February 18th when we signed kicker Younghoe Koo and punter Ryan Allen both to one-year contracts. Now, the Falcons actually released Ryan Allen about a month later. I'm expecting you're going to see a few punters come into camp this summer and compete for that spot. It's punter, though. We're not going to worry about it too much right now. At kicker, however, I am a fan of this very, very affordable deal for Younghoe Koo. He was good inside of 40 for the most part last year. He did struggle from distance, and that could be a problem if he doesn't really work on that this offseason. But those onside kicks, especially at the end of the Saints Thanksgiving game, despite the loss, were the most amazing thing I've ever seen a kicker do in my life. Having a guy that can do that consistently is actually huge, and I don't know, I hope it continues this year because us getting a few extra possessions from onside kicks would be awesome. I would love that. Next, the Falcons picked up Matt Schaub's $2 million option for 2020. I'm pretty neutral about this move. Personally, I feel like we could have just let him walk, take the $375,000 hit, that's not that much, and sign a cheaper backup. Obviously, it's good to have a veteran guy like this with experience and who did perform well when he was needed last year, but honestly, if Matt Ryan goes down, we're screwed anyways, so I would rather just save on the position, but that's not an objective stance. I can understand why the Falcons would do this, and if we need him for just one game, he's probably worth that $2 million. With that, we move on to mid-March, where some of the bigger dominoes start to fall. First off, we have Tyler Davison, who signed a 3-year, $12 million deal. Now, Davison was a regular in our defensive tackle rotation last year, playing over 50% of snaps. Davison certainly isn't the biggest name out there, but he is a good run stopper, and I expect we'll see him continue to do well in that regard. This is a guy that I'm glad to have back, making some room up front for Deion Jones to do his job. Now, March 16th is when things start to really get interesting, when the legal tampering period begins 2 days before the official start of free agency on March 18th. Now, we released Luke Stocker, who I expected we would probably let go. I personally thought we were most likely to replace him and also Austin Hooper, who we let walk through the draft. However, we instead traded a 2nd and 5th round pick for Hayden Hurst from Baltimore, plus a 4th round pick. Now, I personally am a huge fan of this trade and of Hayden Hurst. First off, he's affordable. Hurst is still on his rookie deal, so he's not going to eat nearly the amount of money that re-signing Austin Hooper would have taken. The guy is just good, too. He wasn't the preferred tight end target of Lamar Jackson last year, but he's quick, he's got great hands, and a lot of people think he's a better blocker than Austin Hooper, who really was lackluster in that regard. Frankly, I think it's entirely possible that we see Hurst perform better than Hooper did in our system. It's not a guarantee by any means, and losing Hooper still hurts, but in terms of value for money and for the picks that we traded, I think this is way better than re-signing Hooper to a $10 million deal. Next, the Falcons released backup tackle Ty Sambrailo and, more significantly, running back Devonta Freeman. Unfortunately, it was time for the front office to own up to the mistake they made signing Freeman to this contract. And that's nothing against Freeman personally, but you just can't pay running backs long-term deals. It's not working out for anybody. Didn't work out for us, and it certainly didn't work out for the Rams with Todd Gurley, but we'll get to that later. Now, for as much talk as there's been for a long time now about releasing Freeman, I did think there was a possibility we would hold on to him for one more year just because there's a $6 million dead cap hit that comes with this move. That hurts, and it is going to limit us a little bit in terms of what we're able to do with the $3 million that we saved. And with that, we get to our big signings, Dante Fowler Jr. and Todd Gurley. Now, Fowler, I think to most people, is the more significant of these, particularly because this has been such a weak position for us for a long time now. The Falcons have spent 2 first-round picks on edge rushers in the last 5 years, and neither of them have really worked out yet. Vic Beasley is gone, and I don't think anybody is going to call that a good pick at this point. And Takk McKinley, well, he's got one more year to show us, but so far he hasn't really taken that next step yet. So it's great to see us bring in Fowler, who comes in and is pretty much immediately the best pass rusher on the team. Now, he's no superstar yet, and he's only had one 10-plus sack season, but this is a guy who's capable of 15, and even if he just gets 10 to 12, that's more than we were getting out of anybody else. And if we do see Takk McKinley finally take that next step this year, or if we manage to hit on a guy in the draft at this position, we could actually have a decent pass rush for the first time since Jonathan Abraham, which, God, that's a pathetically long time ago. Now, the other big move here is Todd Gurley, and I know the Georgia fans are very excited about this one. I'm a Tech fan, so I don't have that nostalgia for his college years, but he has been good to me in fantasy in the past, so hey, I like the guy. I'm glad to see him here. Now, like I said earlier, his monster long-term deal with the Rams clearly didn't work out, but this is a short, safe deal, and I hope that Gurley does very well for us. I hope he has 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns, and then I hope that we let somebody else pay him another monster long-term deal because you just can't do that with running backs. The guy is very talented. He's very good. He's got the potential to be a great catalyst for our offense and our running game this year. But even if he performs up to that level, you can't pay him long-term. So I hope Dimitroff has learned his lesson in that regard. And finally, on March 25th, the Falcons signed Allen Bailey to a 1-year, $4.5 million extension. I saw Bailey's contract as a place we could potentially save some money, but the team found it elsewhere, so I'm fine with this. Now, there is one more big cut that isn't technically official yet, and that's Desmond Trufant. The Falcons designated Trufant as a post-June 1 cut, which will allow them to spread the dead cap hit from this out over the next 2 seasons. Which is very important because that dead cap is $10 million. Personally, this isn't a move that I'm crazy about because we definitely aren't going to be able to sign a corner that's at Trufant's caliber with the salary cap we have remaining. And while the hope is that we'll be able to get one in the draft, and I do think this tips our strategy that we will draft a corner in the first round, relying on the draft to find starting caliber talent is always a risk. So, where does all of this leave the team? Well, I feel like we've mostly made positive additions. The only major contributor I feel we've lost is Desmond Trufant, and with all of that done, we're sitting at about $8 million in cap space left. Now, SpotTrack, where I'm getting all of these numbers from, of course, as always, has us estimated at about $6.5 million cost for our draft class. So after that, we're going to be sitting at just about $2 million, which is not a lot. We do already have 63 players on the roster, though, so once this gets trimmed down a little more, we're going to be comfortably under the cap with a little bit of room to make some other depth additions. Overall, I feel like the front office has handled free agency fairly well so far. Finally, I want to quickly talk about what this likely means for our 2020 draft class. I'll go into more detail on this in a future video, but I think the big thing here that we can take away is we're probably taking a cornerback in the first round. A few weeks ago, I would have told you that we're almost definitely taking an edge rusher, as that's our biggest position of need. But with Dante Fowler coming in, we do have an actual starting quality player at that position now. And with the loss of Trufant, we really do need a corner. I like that the team brought back Bleedy Ray Wilson to play in that position, and I am hoping that Isaiah Oliver takes a step forward this year. He certainly has the tools to be elite at that position. This draft is considered pretty good for cornerbacks, so I think we're certainly capable of getting a guy that is starting caliber, but we'll go into more depth on that next time. One final thing to note. These moves, and in particular the Dante Fowler signing, as I mentioned earlier, are very all-in. We're in a position where we need to hit on a corner in the draft, and we need Fowler to pan out. If he doesn't live up to the value of this contract, it's going to cripple our defense for the next 3 years. And if you don't see this team, and in particular that unit, take a huge step forward this year, it's the end of Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff. And I know people, myself included, have been saying this is the end for 2 years now, but this time, really, Blake is giving them one last shot. And with that Fowler signing, they're taking it. And if we don't make the playoffs, I think we're starting over next year with a new coach, a new front office, and a pretty total roster rebuild. So just to summarize one more time, I think the team is in a good position right now. If a few key guys, particularly Tack McKinley, Caleb McGarry, whoever the left guard ends up being, can take a step up this year, we could actually be pretty good in the trenches. And if we can just have some consistency at the line of scrimmage for the first time in a few years, we could be a very good football team. We're certainly going to need to hit on some contributors in the draft, but I think we're in a good position going forward, and I'm certainly excited for the season right now. Thank you so much for watching. Do be sure to check out those links in the description to the Atlanta Community Food Bank and to the Giving Kitchen, both great local organizations who could use your help right now. I hope you all stay safe, and whenever we get out of quarantine, I'll see you around Atlanta.